Thank you, Aliki and Charlotte, for this wonderful journey. So now we can open the assembly to invite everyone to join with their questions and thoughts. And we would be, very happy that now you join with your faces, with your videos. We already have some questions kind of aligned in the Zoom chat already, but it's also possible to ask them via if you're listening in YouTube or Vimeo, and we will read them. So maybe Bruno wants to start.
Yes.
Before we start, we would like to ask if perhaps we can have everyone take a moment and perhaps think about one thing that came out of you call them breakout rooms, I believe, out of the smaller scale groupings of we's. And if every we can simply write down one thought or idea or resonance that has come out of this to perhaps then share through this text-based interface or through Word, as is preferable. So maybe we just take one moment for everyone to write down one thing that has stayed with them.
Let's do that, Prem. It's a wonderful idea.
We thank you. We see many comments already coming in this text interface. We give it one more moment so that everyone can contribute, always. And maybe then from 2021, perhaps later, in some moments, we then read those if needed for those who are accessing on other channels in other technologies. We are also going to use the technology, I believe, is called Zoom, and we are going to unspotlight ourselves. And we would also encourage, perhaps we can remove spotlight from the we known as Inga, and we could encourage everyone to, I believe in the northeast of your display, there is a button called View. If we click on View, We may see gallery, and that will allow us to see all of the we's who are in the room. We would actually love to ask, is there any we here who would like to read some of the comments in the text interface? Perhaps a we who has not yet spoken, but would like to. It seems we are silent, but we are never actually silent. So we'll also encourage us, if we feel comfortable, to use the button at Southwest and unmute ourselves, simply so that we can hear us and where we are and understand that we are in a space now across time. And that may make it more comfortable for some of those us's who would like to speak to come to word.
Hello, Prem. Do you hear me? Yes. We wanted to ask you, as your generation from the future, how did you quit on your addiction to fossil fuels? And if you actually managed to get rid of this addiction?
Thank you for the question. Should we answer? Or Pauliina, would the one as Pauliina like to answer?
Yes, thank you, our ancient friend, for the question. We simply ran out of fossil fuel.
Thank you, Pauliina. We also have often taken inspiration from the things that you called novels, which were also artworks. One that we found very interesting was a book called The Ministry of the Future by, I believe, a we who called themselves Kim Stanley Robinson. This we tried to outline almost a plan for some ways that some people in the future could work together at different scales. It was very provocative, though not entirely accurate in its predictions.
Okay, so I'll ask a quick question because this is starting to be scary. Is there any arrangement between the organizers of these talks and the IPCC to actually give them some feedback on what's been spoken about here? Did they show any interest in hearing back the ideas that could be elaborated here, or just the embryos of ideas that could be put forth? Please, anyone do.
I can give it a try. From 2021. No, actually not. This whole thing started with the idea of asking whether we can be part of the reviewing process of the IPCC next to the scientific assessment. And it's Bruno and Inga that came up with the idea of the IPACC, which is now a beautiful timeline towards 2161. But we can take all your ideas and bring it to them. I think that's a very good idea.
Can I add something? Hi, Carlos. I'm not sure if you followed yesterday, but two of the vice chairs were in conversation with Hisham and in conversation with us. And on our conversations behind the scenes, they were actually open and interested in these possibilities, and even suggested ways in which, in practical terms, there could be an engagement in the not only in the assessment report, but also in the observation of their organization. There's something called the partner observation organizations that see their ways of working. So they were proposing alternatives that we could bring this engagement with the IPCC beyond rhetorics or speculation or conversation. Of course, the feasibility of those proposals are still yet to be assessed. What is still yet to be assessed is what is the direction that we want to go towards, and not necessarily linger on this object of discussion, the IPACC. That's something that needs to necessarily occur. So yeah, I think the IPCC, or the contact that we had with some of the people that work for the IPCC was fruitful, in the sense that they were also proposing other ways of interacting beyond this rhetorical.
Yeah, and maybe I can add to that. This whole idea of the Earth Intensive actually stems from the wish in order to allow a multitude of voices to speak with each other about the larger questions, whether they relate to art or whether they relate to a larger spectrum of disciplines or sectors. And something that Yuba of the IPCC yesterday also suggested is not to call it an intergovernmental panel, but a people's panel. And in our session just now, we also were talking about this. Maybe we should deviate the discussion a little bit away from the arts as a domain that needs to solve or that needs to do anything, but maybe go beyond what the artist is and say an artist, is a person, and start to talk about people. And it has always been sort of my question whether, how do you organize a larger assembly and have people speak? As you can see, it's quite difficult, although we are really succeeding. But how do you allow a multitude of voices to speak? Now, there's another project that we are at the moment working on, which is our going against or being critical of the renaming of the Bauhaus, the new European Bauhaus. And with a number of presentations, or with a number of institutes, we've written a letter, and that letter has been signed hundreds of times by professionals or people around the world, also who agree with us that the naming of the European Green Deal towards the new European Bauhaus is non-inclusive, is Eurocentric, etc., etc. If you can read my article together with Rolando Vasquez, in which we lay out basically, all of the reasons. Within this project, we felt also that we need to push the European Commission to work less top-down and to involve the public in these kind of decisions that mark all of us. The question here is, how do you do such thing? And the European Commission at the moment is doing that by instigating a design process, which will end in July. Most people don't know it, but you can write yourself in and come up with ideas, etc., etc. This should be a transparent process. The problem, however, is one, that this process is mediated by an administration. So it's through an administrational framework that we have to do this. But also they need to overcome how do you structure ideas? How do you structure, how do you make it as such that people can speak? And this is difficult. And that's also a question that actually that we put forward. Or do we need to do it? And are there other ways? So maybe that's to add to that.
We would add, we see somebody else has a question or comment, but we would just add briefly to your comment, Hisham, to say, well, since we are speaking to you only in, I believe, February of 2021, you may not yet know what will happen next. And perhaps actually I could give the word to Pauliina, with whom who we were just discussing how it's not yet known in your time that the IPCC will in fact embed artists within their work. Pauliina, would you be willing to send a message about that?
Yes, thank you. My fellow ancestors from neighboring nations, I would like to inform you that the turning point of inclusion of more voices to IPCC's work was having a straightforward effect on getting the political clout for the recommendations made by IPCC. And one of the crucial roles was that after the meeting that you were having in February 2021, the art community chose to accept the invitation made by IPCC to have a role as a monitoring role, part of peer reviewing the literature. And from that process, the mutual dialogue started. The artists providing information for the IPCC, the scientists, nature scientists, what kind of forms of knowledge art does possess, especially in order to make the information not only from the scientists to the citizens, but also from the citizens to scientists, available and accessible in other ways than just the specific science report, form of the specific science report. And artists choose to collaborate and join forces and make alliances with especially indigenous artists and indigenous communities and environmentalists. And there were several fields of knowledge holders from the arts that were giving their time and effort with and without resources of how making this dialogue possible, how to build on platforms of dialogue. And that caused a huge democratization of IPCC's work and led us to major breakthrough policies and decisions approximately 120 years ago.
We are so happy. I think I want to applaud that. That's fantastic. We are very happy that this will be happening, and this gives us hope, in fact, and might move us away from this burden that we feel that artists should and have to solve the world. I think this is really nice. I think there are questions from the present. Frank?
Yes, well, I have to introduce myself a little bit. I did with the others already. I'm a scientist, I'm a climatologist, and I worked for the European Commission. So I want to
Nice.
Welcome. Number of buttons here. So in a research institute, the only European research institute of the European Commission, it's called the Joint Research Center. And I did that until 5 years ago. So I was involved in IPCC, I was involved in negotiations, the various COPs, and I can confirm what Pauliina just said. There is in the last 10 years in the scientific community a great opening towards the arts. And I realized that the artists were always open to the scientific world and wanted to interact with the scientific world, but we did not took an invitation because we were busy with our work, and it's already 110% job to really do scientific work, like it is 110% job to do as an artistic work. No? So, but anyway, the last 10 years, there is a lot of openness in various research institutes. They bring, I think you know that, you have residents, artists in residence and that sort of programs also in scientific organizations, like in the Joint Research Center. I made that program 5 years ago, and we have now a festival every 2 years. Now with COVID, it's all a little bit. So, Pauliina, these things happened and they are growing. And if you talk about IPCC, I remember the 4th report or the 3rd report, the 6th report next year, no? We were saying, okay, we have these reports on solutions for climate change, whether it's reducing emissions or adapting to climate change. We realized that the solution we were offering were sort of, how we saw it, they didn't connect with the culture of the people. No? Certain solutions we offered work in one culture, but not in another culture, right? Simply, if you talk about eating less meat, I mean, that works in one culture, but it certainly doesn't work in Austria or in Germany. So you have to overcome certain things there. So I think art can play a role in addressing this cultural problem. No, we produce solutions, but to make these solutions work, they have to be embedded in a larger culture. And that at IPCC, at least 5 or 10 years ago, nobody was able to address that. We were knowing the problem, but nobody was there to address that. And then maybe after that, as Pauliina said, there was more opening to sociologists, artists, and things. So these things are happening.
Sure.
And one thing about the Commission, European Commission, there is often a wrong idea about the European Commission, and that's the fault of the Commission itself. We did not a very good job in saying what we did and how we did it. But the European Commission is far from a top-down organization. I mean, if the Commission comes out with, for instance, the Green Deal, no, it's based on years of committees, no, with the countries, with the NGOs, with the business NGOs, and so on and so on. The Commission even pays money to Greenpeace, and because she realizes that these NGOs don't have the money like Shell and BP has to come to the meetings. No, so the Commission even stimulates, but it's true, it never stimulated the art world. And that's true, and that's an opportunity. So again, in the GRC, in the Joint Research Center 5 years ago, we started by inviting artists to, at least at the scientific level, because we were doing science for the Commission, to sort of bringing the artists to broaden our scientific view on things and to discuss and to build an alliance. I mean, that's, I think, the right word, building an alliance.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you, Frank. To add to that, we've had 2 meetings with the European Commission, with the Joint Research Center with Xavier Troussard, and with Ruud Reichenstein, who works with the Office of Ursula von der Leyen. And they were really fruitful. And you're exactly right. They are very much open. And I absolutely believe that to make such thing as European Green Deal must have been a 2 years, 3 years work in negotiations all over. And I applaud the European Commission for that. I applaud Frans Timmermans for that, and also Ursula von der Leyen. But in fact, the naming of the European Bauhaus, that was sort of a quick decision, and maybe not too much thought about. So for us, and as a Moroccan Dutch, I feel excluded when we need to follow something which is much more of a German Leitkultur, or so we need to discuss these things. So that's why we wrote the letter, and this was successful, and I mean, we had great discussions, and I was absolutely surprised that we would have the IPCC at the table. So now we have that, all right? So now we have these connections, and now we have these people at the table. So what do we do from now? And I've heard many great things. Also in the chat, I saw maybe we need to write a charter. So from your position, Frank, from what you've done at the European Commission, what you've done in your professional life, what would you suggest we should do at this point?
Well, you know, I changed jobs 5 years ago. I retired early because I felt the need to do things differently for my own mental health, because working for the Commission as a scientist for the European Commission, always on, I mean, it's hard, no? It's frustrating, and it goes slowly, but it goes forward. I mean, that's the lesson I took. It goes forward, no? Opening towards artists, it's there. But I made my own museum, the Museum of Anthropology, which is my way to sort of put everything together, to make a collection of my ideas, basically. So because you have to sort of, so that's what I'm doing now. So I'm very much in between art and science and politics, in this somewhere there. I'm not an artist. I was a scientist. So I don't care what I am. As I wrote in the chat, it's all work at the end. No?
Exactly.
You have to keep working, whether you're an artist or a scientist or a politician. If you want to move things forward, it doesn't go by itself. You have to sort of push it and create, upscaling or side scaling. No, we sort of have to connect all these very nice initiatives that are happening. This is my third, by chance, and not every week I join them, but it's a third grouping with people like you that I follow. This week, last week it got me in Scotland. It's a chance, by chance that it's the. So how can we? And that's my question to the people in 2161. How did you do it? I mean, this was technology part of it. I mean, we meet through technology. To me, it should be possible. Technology should be able to connect all these various platforms that are popping up on Zoom and Skype, and somehow that must be, we should be able to connect that somehow, that we all talk together in one room. Or how did you come up?
Well,
to the meet?
Thank you for the question from 2021. We would answer that the solutions are always various, and they are always multivocal, and they happen at different scales. As other we's from 2161 suggested earlier, some of them were about how we conceive of ourselves, how we relate to others on a smaller scale. Technology for sure played roles as well, but there were also changes in the terms. As we can see in the text interface, there is a comment from Matthew C. Wilson about artistic or art as an adjective that modifies instead of as an outcome. We also were struck by how in the comments from February 2021 from the IPCC, it seems that art is often seen maybe by scientists or often by the general public as a discrete set of objects or outcomes, such as a painting, a photograph, a polar bear, or something else. We realized that, in fact, this means that a greater understanding of what art is and has been for a number of decades, if not longer, is needed. And that is to think of art perhaps as an adjective, as suggested, or also in terms of the longer term processes that artists are and have always been putting into place. So perhaps this kind of awareness can also shift the role of what an embedded artist within a government organization might be able to do. As one of the other people from your time, Fernando, also suggested in mentioning the artist placement group. We find these to be very valuable suggestions, not towards outcome, but towards process and ways of knowing and seeing and listening and generating that are outside of the ways that what some people thought of as Western scientific models often produced in terms of singular bodies of knowledge and output.
You're right, it's very difficult to talk on this platform, but I'm going to try. I was thinking as you were speaking about IPACC, and I was thinking about what the role of, I mean, I question the notion of artist as I think we're all artists, so that's my starting point. But I was just imagining the Academy or a bunch of people from here working with IPACC and thinking about the way that IPACC might take, or the IPCC might take a platform at somewhere like COP26. And that being the work that you think about how you can engage a huge audience of people who are there to discuss futures and acting together and work out, because I often think you get all these people who are making decisions in one place together. And how do you create a space where you can help them change their thinking or open up a new gateway? And I think that's what we can do, is we can work with people presenting information, or maybe encourage them to take the platform in a different way, where they're not presenting data anymore, but they're actually working with imagination. And I think scientific imagination, artists are scientists, artists are philosophers, scientists are geographers. You know, we've been almost by the system, we've been compartmentalized, and we keep trying to come back together to work together. So that's where I see. I'm not going to. So I have a story, and the ending of my story, which I'm trying to grow this story, is that people are taken on this journey basically back into the past, and then they're brought back from the past back to the present again. So they sort of see what's happened, and I think that's what I'm just wondering if what's possible between in collaborations or breaking down boundaries or working together.
But these things have been tried. I think many of you must know Bruno Latour and the work he does. And at the occasion of 2015, the Paris, the UNFCCC, so the climate negotiation, the big meetings that you talked about, in 2015 was in Paris. And a couple of months before that meeting, he organized a UNFCCC, not of governments, but of people and of humans and non-humans. No? So the atmosphere was represented there, and the oceans were represented there by people, obviously. And so the discussion was totally different and more inclusive and holistic and than what you would have at the UNFCCC, where you have countries talking at the end. No? But I don't know what, this happened, and he probably has a book about this. But then, okay, that's one step, one attempt, and we have to work on it and do. You have to experiment. You have to do all kinds of experiments.
And it's hugely important. I mean, this project, I know the project has had great influence on other projects. I mean, there's other people like Jonas Staal with the World Summit. There is many different kinds of ways that people have tried to build fora, and it's important. It's like it adds to. I think this is what we do. It's a process of negation. It's a process of addition. It's a process, and I think we need to keep on doing that. Perhaps what we're doing now is also to provide for a way. Maybe we are communicating actually to people outside of the arts world at this point. Maybe you are trying to tell the world, you know, to give precedence to the arts and to give space to it and to allow for it and to move. I mean, you have to understand the discussion in the Netherlands just 2 years ago was why culture? Why art? Art was seen as a leftist hobby. They had stickers. Art is a leftist hobby. We had the cuts in 2012. I mean, people see culture as an extra thing. We have a ministry of culture. But shouldn't you see everything through the lens of culture? Isn't everything cultured? Isn't everything mediated? Shouldn't the Ministry of Economy be in the Ministry of Culture, let's say? I mean, I read a beautiful article yesterday about how economy is a subset of ecology. I thought that was super interesting to look at it this way than the other way around. So I think we need to build upon all these projects and add to them and change them. And that's what we do, a continuous, interplay. Yeah, I just wanted to say that, yeah.
But then sorry if I...
go ahead,
sorry,
Frank,
can I interrupt for a moment from 2161? I see in the chat, in the text interface, there's so many people and people who are even asking to come to word. So I'd ask that maybe those who haven't spoken, but who would like to speak, please feel free to join. Ilyani, I'm seeing. Juliana, would you like to come to word?
Yes, of course. Thank you. So let's see how we do this. It's my first time on Zoom. So there we go. Yeah. Yes. Thank you for this interesting day. I would like to bring up a question and perhaps a contribution, maybe a proposal, starting from matter, materials, going through science and art practice as things that might have an impact, transformative impact. And as Hisham says, of course, we cannot save the planet, we are like tiny mosquitoes on a big elephant, right? But maybe it's important to see how we deal with what we consume from this planet. I have some materials that I'd like to show you here. Could you guess what is this one? It's camphor.
It is what? I'm sorry?
Camphor. Camphor. Camphor is a resin from a tree.
Yeah.
Camphor?
Yeah.
Camphor. You find it back in this kind of balms for pain. It's very mental-like, right? In fact, it's a resin from a tree that grows in Japan, in China, countries like that. This is a piece of a tree from Cluj, Transylvania. This is a tiny piece of tree from Maastricht, Kano, the forest. My question is, how do we relate to such materials if the information that we have about them comes from books, from internet? So we do not touch them, we don't feel them, we cannot smell them, we do not feel in which ways they impact our bodies. And I believe if various industries and businesses, they damage the earth, is perhaps because they do not have this awareness. Because I cannot imagine anyone goes happily to sleep in the evening thinking, I'm so happy I've destroyed half of the Amazon forest, so I'm going to sleep well tonight. So the question is, what kind of practices can we envision that can raise awareness? And can we as artists come with those kind of practices? Because art as a practice is perhaps a process in which we try to understand something, and as a result, maybe we create a new vision of the world or of that subject that we are working with. If that makes sense, I could share it, but you see what I mean? It's a training of the senses. I'm very honest about that. I think if you do make a contact as a person, at an emotional level with trees, then as a director of a company that produces paper, the decisions that you are going to make are going to be impacted by the emotions that you have, by the way you feel about the tree.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Oh, you're muted. Thank
Yeah,
you.
we live detached from nature. That's a bit the problem. Eh? So that say we live detached from nature. More
Yeah.
and that's,
yeah. All right. I would also have a suggestion, a proposal to come up with something that I don't want to take too much space. So I don't know, maybe tomorrow I come again and make this proposal as performance.
Great.
Is that okay?
Yeah, we thank you, Juliana. Yes, I believe that the time today is limited, but tomorrow is another day in 2021.
Right. Thank you.
So the time, it's 5 p.m. Central European time, old standards. And I would like to ask both Prem and Pauliina and Ama and Julieta, who are in another dimension, but for sure with us, and also all the attendees in the Zoom and people on chat, to help us synthesizing a message or a question that we want to take to the group of the present in tomorrow's assembly. For this, I would like to give priority to Prem and Pauliina, who are in 2161. And then, of course, we can have everyone else's contribution if you'd like. But Prem and Pauliina, could you tell us your messages?
Pauliina, would you like to begin?
Okay, I can do that. My dear ancestors of neighboring nations, I would suggest you, when you are now making your decisions, you keep your calms and focus on now what is on the front line, because now is not a time of, I don't know how to say that in English, even with that old technology, that you would understand me correctly, that now is not a time of democracy for that everyone's voice is as important, because you really need to focus on the vital information, what is on the front line of science and art and activism and nature conservation now. And also that do not get too stuck on the tags, role tags, whether you call yourself an artist or an activist or a scientist. Now in our present 2161, my native language still don't have a word for an artist. And we are quite proud of that achievement. And we still don't have a creation story for a human being yet. And we are proud of that achievement of that as well. And by assessing that, what is the most necessity or important information, how to build a list of demands, as I'm seeing one of the teleprompters from the ancient technology is messaging us. And what is the way to communicate that list of demands, and how to do having these small circles of discussion and making proper protocols of having a possibility to have everybody a voice, but then choosing who is going to present according to this protocol, the decision made by each group to a larger audience. And from that, it needs to be based on the latest outfront information, frontline information.
We thank you, Pauliina. We would say, we are many we's. We do not speak monovocally. And the other we's, Ama, Julieta, who are in other dimensions, will for sure represent other positions, other ways of knowing, other ways of communicating. But we will speak for this one moment, this one instantiation. we will agree with Pauliina. We think that, first of all, we need for the present to be clearer. We need for the present in its own way to make these demands, to make these priorities, and to see that art is not simply a plaything. Art is always a form of communication, of community, of communion. Whether we call it art or another word is not as relevant to us. What we call art, and this we, is only a very limited we. What we in this particular room call art is already a thing that from one century to another, from the 18th century to the 19th century to the 20th century, changed so radically. And so we're not so concerned with that. What we are concerned with is how this thing called art in 2021 can be a Trojan horse. How art has multiple scales, this thing that you call. How on an individual level, it may allow people to find the calm and peace and clarity that takes them out of the world of consumption and the world of speed. Yet also how the thing you call art in 2021 might have the ability to bring different actors together. How that thing called art can bring unlikely bedfellows together and connect the thing called human with the thing called animal, with the thing called material, and in all other forms, as it is done. And the third is that in 2021, this thing that was still called art, it had evolved over hundreds of years to have access to power. It could speak to the things that were called governments, to the things that were called nations, even sometimes to the things that were called corporations, or at least to the then individuals who seemed to lead those things that were called corporations. And so in this form, this thing called art has access. And this access allows it to communicate important messages, not only the clear messages, but also those that are bodily and emotive and beautiful and confusing. But it can still create a linkage between this world of knowledge that for some reason was called science, but before that was also connected with things known as belief and known as spirit and known as knowledge in other ways. And it can perhaps reconnect them by having an influence upon this sphere called science, this sphere called government, this sphere called power. This is what this we would say to 2021.
Thank you so much. Message registered. Thank you very much, Prem. Thank you, Pauliina, Julieta, and Amma from your own respective futures and dimensions for the burden of sending the message to another time with these archaic technological devices in between us. Thank you.